Welcome, everybody. Last month we braved the weather. This month we're braving the heat. So glad to see so many people here tonight. Getting started. On your table, you'll see that there's a copy of the bylaws changes. So if you haven't had a chance to read them, please read them, and we'll be voting on those later on in the meeting. Just remember, we're recording the meeting. So if you have questions or anything else, please use the microphone that's not there right now, but it will be. We're still looking for another camera person, so one doesn't have to do it. We're looking for about 4 or so that we can rotate. Tool swap is this Saturday. If you don't have anything to swap, just come on out and look around, see if there's something you might want to buy or trade for. And again, please be mindful of the show and tell time. We want to give the presenter as much time as he needs. And Bill has something to say. You want to come up here, Bill?
I'm starting to work on classes for late fall and into the spring. So if anybody has a subject that they would like to see taught as a class, send an email to vicepresident@slwg.org, and I'll try and get that arranged. I have a couple of sign-up sheets here for old school guys like me. There's a sign-up for the fall Rockwood program. We haven't started yet, but we're going to be making kits. I expect we're probably going to make about 100 toys. So looking for volunteers. There is a sign-up for the picnic, which is September 10. Starts at 11:30. It's going to be over. The picnic's going to be in Forest Park. We're going to get a tour at the Art Museum of their furniture. So it should be a lot of fun. If you don't want to sign up here on the paper, you can also sign up online. What I need a count of if you're coming and how many people you're bringing with you so that we know how much food to get. The times are good times. It's going to start at 11:30 and it runs till 4, whether it really runs that long. I haven't talked to the Art Museum people in a while, but I know if we've got 50 or 75 people, they're not going to want us in one group, so we're going to have to spread it out. So it's important that I get a fairly accurate count, so please sign up one way or another. Also, there's a sheet for people who might be interested in volunteering to help with the picnic. We're going to have to pick up water, we're going to have to pick up sodas, somebody has to get ice and things like that. So if you're willing to help, either sign up there or send me an email and we'll get that going. That's all I had. Thank you. All right.
Thanks, Bill. Upcoming events. Tool swap, 9 o'clock, Saturday. July 21st meeting. We'll have, I can't pronounce her last name. I guess that's Berwin, Christina Berwin. She's the lady that does the stuff that Bill was just talking about for Rockwood School District. She's going to be coming in and talking about that program. So that ought to be a really good one. Then in August, we got Joe Mendel, who's a luthier. And then September 10th is the picnic. September 15th is Jay Knopfsinger is going to be talking about Hepplewhite design. Yes.
What is
luthier? It's an instrument maker. Yes, like guitars, violins. Upcoming classes. We got 2 safety classes coming up, and I think that's supposed to be 7-7 is a safety class, and 8-4 is another safety class. What's that? Maybe 7-9, yeah. Yeah, first Thursday of the month. 8-6 is a decorative wire inlay that Adam's going to be teaching. Ought to be really good. And then 8:13 is a shorty class for bandsaws. Community outreach. First is our toy. Went over there and made a copy. We've had 269 toys delivered today, which is really good. And Wayne, do you need to say anything about the Christmas toy program?
We've got a couple of hundred complete, a whole bunch more in process. We'll be assembling stuff tomorrow afternoon in the shop.
All right. And then Tom Turney with Home Sweet Home. I know he wants people to make desks.
No.
Not desks, tables. Tables.
And coffee tables, and I can tell you, they love what we're doing.
Oh, all right.
Flying out the door. So, the more folks that we have involved with that, the better.
Do we still have a lot of wood there in the shed?
Yes, we do have wood in the shed that's available for folks. We're going to be out there Saturday from 9 until 11 to pick up any finished tables or to distribute wood to anybody that would like to get involved in the program. It's a very good program. It's white oak. It's first and seconds. It's, a lot of work. I won't lie to you. But a lot of sawing and gluing and making planks, gluing stuff together to shape the tables or form the tables. And the design of the tables is totally up to the builder. We have some suggestions, but whatever the builder wants to build, that's fine with us.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, show and tell. So if you have show and tell, come on over. This is just something just really funny that I made. It's a circle jig for my bandsaw. And I used to always make wood ones that I always had after a few years. They get so many holes in them that you can't do it. So I was at Savers one day, and I found this bag of a couple rockler knobs and had some miscellaneous other things. And they had this little bitty thing here in the middle. And I had no idea what that was. Well, so I went up to Rockler's and I talked to Brian. I don't know if he remembers this or not. And he looked at that and goes, oh, yeah, that goes to our bandsaw tabletop. And it slides. You put it in there, you slide it back and forth, you make different size circles. So I made my own. And it was just out of coming from, oh, what is this? You just never know when you get a grab bag or something, what you can do with it. All right, next.
Well, I'm a new member here, and I took the fundamentals class so I could learn how to do some of this stuff. But first thing was a tool tote. Well, the tool tote was pretty simple, and I wanted to learn a few more things about woodworking. So I talked to Wayne, and I built a steam box and did this bent lamination here. And the wood is white oak, and so in a sickly fashion, I decided to fume it. And so I fumed the white oak, and I think if I would have made some furniture, I probably would have fumed it one less day. I fumed it for 3 days, and then I was trying to figure out where I was going to store all my chisels. So I made a rack here right in the bottom of the toolbox. There's all my chisels. So now I have a place to store all of the hand woodworking tools that I'm learning how to use in fundamental class. So that's it.
Hello, I had a need for a table saw tinning jig, and I have a unifence rip fence up on my table saw, which has extruded aluminum for the fence. And so I had to build a new fence, and then it uses this shoe, and it slides on there. And I just used a piece of paper as my shim to give me clearance. And then I like these micro grip dovetailing jig clamps. So so that holds it on there. And then when I make my tenons, I set the fence, just my table saw fence, just once, and then I use shims to cut the tenons with. And then you use these same shims when I use a router to router my mortises. And that way you have one setup and it all fits after you set some initial test pieces. So this is a test piece for a double tenon, and then this is my first sample that came out of that, and then this is a test piece for a single tenon. Thank you.
So I'm very excited to have a show and tell. About a year or so ago, we had a lady contact us at the Guild because her father had passed away, and he was a woodworker, had a bunch of wood. It was in Valley Park. Many of you may have gone, and I did. And I found this hunk, which I don't know what kind of wood it is, but it just spoke to me, and I had no idea what I was going to do. And at home, I had this slice that had a gap in it. So I thought, looks like a lamp to me. So I just put a polyurethane satin finish on this after I had to cut it to level it or square it as best I could. Thank God my little brother was visiting, and he muscled the 25-inch drill bit through the center so we could run the wire. And then I just took that same polyurethane satin finish and put it on the slice after I had filled the little gap there with a poly resin in an orangish color. And the whole thing looks like it's not so cool orange. But I have orange sherbet walls at home, and so it just looks great. So Tuesday, I waited with bated breath for Brody's lampshade place to open up. I lugged this in, and I told the lady I wanted the perfect lampshade for this lamp, and she walks over to her shelves, picks this thing up, puts it on, and in 7 minutes, I'm out the door. And then, but first, before we did that, I don't know if you can see it, we decided to use this kind of organic finial on top instead of the little $5 one that I got at Menards. I won't say it was as much as the lampshade, but they're handshaking, let me tell you. So yes, it's kind of heavy. It's kind of an organic-looking river rock, is what it is. So all in all, I'm just tickled to death with it, and it actually works with the 3-way bulb. So there you go. That's it.
Just a little turned box, but like a lot of things you get carried away with, I actually made this first with the idea of putting some sort of a base on it, kind of a flared base, would put a small tenon on the bottom. But it looked so good that way, I needed to do something else. So this is a piece of Osage orange, I believe, and so I made a box in a box, and it's got its own little lid, and they just stack up and look cute. And useless.
Put this on somewhere?
Yeah, there you go.
So I didn't bring anything because it's too big and it's in Texas now. But this is probably the project I'm most proud of. I built a blanket chest for my daughter and her husband, and it was all, one of the guys at work told me it was swamp oak, and another guy told me it was bur oak, so I'm not exactly sure what it is, but it just had beautiful grain pattern in it. So I took the class that Wayne Watson had last August teach you how to do mortise and tenons, and this is the first time I've ever done that. So I experimented a bunch with some scraps, and it turned out all right. The wood was, it had not been, I'd had the wood for about 5 years, and I got it from school, and they had not stored it correctly, so a lot of the wood was curved to the left or right, or was curved up. So I had to figure out how I'm going to make the best of it. So what I ended up with was short sections like that. Just put vertical panels in there. So my top and bottom rails, I cut a groove in those with my dado blade on the table saw, and then put tongues on the vertical panels and put those in place. And then did a lot of back and forth with it, trying to get the spacing right on the boards so they would match up, so I would have equal distances on the ends, things like that, and then using quarters to put in between. So I did a half lap on the front and the back so the vertical panels could slide when they expand and contract. So it weighed a lot. The top itself was 17 pounds, and I have no idea how much the whole thing was when it was all said and done, but it was pretty cool to do. And then we just finished it with like 3 coats of Danish oil and just rubbed and rubbed and rubbed. But it was a fun project, and thanks to Wayne Watson for teaching us, and Mike Sistek the same way too, because they were in the shop, and I would ask them questions. They say, "Well, you ought to do it like this." So I'm pretty lucky that we got great guys like that to help us out. Thank you.
All right. I will tell you, first of all, my name is spelled correctly on my website. There's no E in my name, so sorry. That's okay. I got into this business, custom wine cellar work, back in 2004. I've had a partner that I worked with. I went out on my own in 2009. It's mostly residential work. I've done a number of country clubs around town, the wine rooms in the country clubs, Algonquin, Forest Hills. We're about ready to do something for the St. Louis Club, Sunset Country Club. So if you've ever been in any of those places, that's all the work that we've done over the years. A couple of retail wine stores around town. The most recent one is the Clayton Wine House in downtown Clayton, not downtown Clayton, it's on Clayton Road between Brentwood and Hanley. There's a St. Louis wine market down in the Chesterfield Valley. So kind of goes all over the place. Most of my projects tend to be fairly large. Couple of screenshots of just some of the equipment that we have in the shop. I've got 2 full-time carpenters that work for me. They're really good. I mean, they can run circles around me when it comes to carpentry work, and they honestly should be the ones up here talking. I can talk a lot more about the business than a lot of the woodworking, but the powerhouse of my shop is the table saw, it's got a sliding attachment on it. We do a lot of plywood work, and that really comes in handy. A lot of the other equipment, as you can imagine, is on wheels. I just wheel it out of the way. My shop is roughly 50 by 30, 1,500 square feet. So it's not huge when you get all the lumber and stuff that you need in there and all the equipment. But the chop saw area is another area that gets a lot of use, because I usually need about 10 feet of in feet and out feet on either side of that, depending on which direction I want to go, and that's what that far right-hand picture is. All the other stuff over here is the stuff that you can imagine. It's a planer. We got an oscillating spindle sander, which comes in handy, and I like that because the table will tilt, and so that helps sometimes with some funky projects. And then joiners and bandsaws and, I would say 2/3 of our work is new construction, believe it or not.
my whole goal in this whole thing when we got started was every time there's a builder in town, and I'm talking about the big builders that are building multi-million-dollar homes, when they get another project, they say, hey, I got a new client that's building a home. So there was a constant source of new business coming in. And I would say the remaining third of that is, honestly, it's people that are sitting in this room that like wine that don't necessarily need a 5,000 bottle collection. They've got 500 bottles of wine, which is on the small end of what we do, but they want it properly temperature controlled, and it's either starting with some unfinished space, or a real trend lately has been wine cellars on the main floor of the home instead of the lower level, like off the kitchen. Wood species that we use most often is walnut has been very popular these days. Sapelli, so mahogany. Birch, I use some rip-cut white oak occasionally. Poplar, usually, if we do that, we'll stain it. I've only had done one cellar where they left it totally raw poplar. But for the most part, it's a hardwood that we're using. A popular wood that used to be used was redwood, and that's because it's mold resistant if it ever got wet or in a damp environment. But the problem I have with redwood is, one, it's really soft and it doesn't hold fasteners all that well. So we're usually using something hard where you can't really pull a nail out of it. You're wiggling nail heads off if you ever try to take something apart. At least half of the projects that we do are left totally unfinished. And you'll see that in some of the pictures that are going to come up later. Not everybody wants to spend the extra money on the staining work, but when we're staining things, we're staining it, and then we're doing sanding sealer and then clear lacquer. And all this gets sprayed in our spray booth before it goes to the job site. So I'll make things in as big a thing as I can carry and get it into somebody's house or down the basement or through a door, because it always looks better, of course, when you spray and stain things in bigger pieces. But a lot of times I have to I'd carry things in, assemble it, fasten it together, and then put all trim pieces to cover up all my fasteners. And that just means a lot of in advance planning about how many trim pieces I'm going to need, so I'm not wasting a bunch of lumber putting color on it, and then it sits in a pile and ends up just going in the dumpster. Big trend these days, and I realize this is a woodworking guild, but a lot of metal racking, and you'll see that in some pictures too. It's a combination of metal racking and wood racking. So I've got a company based out of Denver called Vintage View that I buy. They make a number of different metal projects, and I would say the real trend these days is to have a combination of wood racking and metal racking in your cellar. The first thing I always start asking my clients is, what are your needs? Some people are really into small bottles. The regular 750 milliliter bottles is the standard thing. And then some people are very into larger format things, champagne. You got to have a place, if you buy the original wooden case, has a lot of good decoration on it. Some people want to display that, so we're basically creating cubbies for that. Most of the work that we're doing, I would say 95% of the work is an actual wine cellar where we're introducing a cooling unit. So we're basically building a large walk-in refrigerator, if you think about it. The room's got to be well insulated. It's got to have vapor barrier around it. All the doors and so forth are exterior type doors with thermal glass, so that with the weather stripping all around it. Trying to keep the hot air and the moist air, warm goes to cold. So if you have a cold room, which is at 55 degrees, and you got warm air in this room, it's going to have all that moisture coming in, and we got mold issues potentially there. So we don't take any shortcuts when we're dealing with either builders or contractors that we're working with. We are not the ones that are putting up studs and putting up drywall. We farm that out to other people. So we're asking the remodeler or the builder to turn over a finished room to us, which of course we design everything with them, with the electricians and the homeowners and the builders, but all the different trades are sort of looking to me to kind of design the whole thing. And I'll say, okay, you do this, and this. And when everything is done, then we come in with all of our stuff. We've done cigar humidors on several occasions because the guys that like wine tend to like cigars as well. And of course, things like bourbon cabinets have been kind of popular lately. Everyone's getting into something like that. It doesn't necessarily have to be in the cellar, but a lot of people like all that stuff inside their cellar because it's got a lock door on it and keeps, the riffraff away. The kids, for the kids' friends. So again, I'm going to go quickly through this, but this is a cellar that's got a combination of individual bottles kind of styles, where you're sticking the bottles in this way. I would say that's the most traditional way of building a cellar. This one has got some diamond bins in it. It's got some rectangular bins for the wooden cases, and then a decorative arch for light. That's actually a friend's cellar, and his daughter's an artist. And since I took pictures, she painted a landscape on some canvas and inserted that in there. So that was kind of a neat idea. You can see some of the lighting is real important for the wine cellar. It's a tape light, LED tape light. And then there's horizontal storage where you can do this with wood racking. You can do it with metal racking. But seeing the labels. What we do when I make something, I buy lumber from my mill. It's got holes. It's about 5 inches wide. I put a 3-inch hole in it through their milling machine. I've made that before on my table saw by running it diagonally through the fence. If you think about that, put your saw real low, your blade really low, and then just run it through and kind of you're going this way against the blade, and then make another pass, raise the blade up, so that it's a lot of sanding when you're done. I decided to have a supply that to me. I think I looked at how much time it takes to do all that. We've done drawer units underneath. It breaks up a little bit. This one has some lights on top, glass top. This is one of the coolest things that we've done. That's actually a plain line in the middle of the circular area. Those shelves actually spin around. And that's their main sort of champagne display. That was challenging because literally put right in the middle of this room. Luckily there was a crawl space underneath it where the electrician could get in there and we could bring power where we needed. So we actually ran power feeds up through the backside of those supports. Done in a similar sort of way, curved cabinets that display bottles. And then we've also I know somebody who's got a CNC machine that can do some carving. So we did on the right side. There's the people's last name started with an H. So we carved an H and had a bunch of real neat designs in there. Circular rooms sometimes are a challenge. So we don't bend anything. Usually what we'll cut stuff like 3/8 of an inch and laminate those around form, glue it form. So then it keeps that form after the glue is dry. A lot of sand there, but I'll make vertical racks, put them together, and then the trim piece on the bottom is the thing that curves. So it's a kind of a combination of rectangular stuff and circular stuff. So these are examples of two different projects, but they all have circular shapes to them. That wood on the left, walnut on the left, and that's Sapelli on the right side. Totally unfinished, raw. So here's some combination room we were talking about. On the left-hand side, that's walnut with clear coat on it. It's staying there. But you see there's additional racking in there of metal types. Some are rods, some are pins. And on the right-hand side, something very similar. We had a lot of wooden cases. So we did a low wooden case storage thing with pins above it. Inlays. I don't know if you guys talk about inlays, but that's kind of a fun thing to do. You can do that with that router, or you can find somebody who's got a CNC machine and make it really easy. We've done it both ways. The router part is really not that difficult. It's just you got to be careful. And as long as you get your right router bits, it's really not that hard. Ladders. I have not made any ladders yet, but I bought ladders from an online company of different sizes. But as I look at them, I know Rockler sells some of the equipment to build a ladder. To me, it looks fairly straightforward for building a ladder. That particular one was only, I think, 6 feet tall. And the one on the right side is about 8 feet tall. Here's again showing how lighting is so important to the work that we do. Then we get occasionally we get into furniture pieces. The first picture on the left, that was all made out of poplar and got quite distressed. It's in a farmhouse out in St. Clair. We get some barn furniture. The third picture is an island in the middle of wine cellars. And then the right-hand side is hard to see the picture, but we did a river pour of two pieces of walnut. So I don't know if you are talking all about epoxy pours, but that has a black pour that has white speckles in it. That was kind of neat. Then some wood bar tops and wood bars. That was all made out of Kelly with a median on it. It's all the same picture. The bottom right-hand one was just it's a slab. It was two pieces of walnut that I think when I bought them, they're 10 feet long, and that 14-foot long countertop like the upper section of the bar. And we just biscuit jointed all together. And then bourbon cabinets. I mean, it's simple cabinetry with lighting in it, and got some glass shelves. This is a way for people to get their bourbon, into a spot that, as my wife yells at me, it's all later around the house. I need to build myself one now. But that's been kind of a trend lately. Putting it inside the cellar really shouldn't matter temperature-wise. This cabinet on the left is in somebody's dining room. Has a curved center section, but that's all temperature controlled. And luckily, we had access behind it to go down into the basement where we put our cooling system. And then the one on the right was kind of interesting. That's the only cellar we've done is actually on somebody's second floor of their house. It's like we call it the wine loft. But that cellar held about 2,200 bottles, and it's right above their garage. And when they remodeled that house, they knew they were going to have a lot of weight up there, so they put some structural steel in there to handle it so the floors didn't start sagging. But that was all made out of poplar, and then got dyed black. So a real modern kind of look. So I wanted to get through all that stuff. I'm not sure exactly what people are interested in, so any questions that people have about the wine cellar business?
I would just ask, what's your greatest challenge when you start a project?
The greatest challenge? Well, the easy things are, pricing and so forth, and we've got all that stuff figured out. I mean, pricing goes up and people kind of understand it. The greatest challenge is kind of communicating with when a client comes to you and says, here's what I want, but they don't know what they want. So I've got to guide them and find out where we're going in this whole thing. I get asked to give bids all the time on things. I go, what am I bidding on? I mean, I need some guidance on what you want, what you need, how much money do you have to spend. So I would say that's the biggest challenge, and that's the early on thing. After that, things are, fairly straightforward. The nice thing about wine cellars is everybody's in a good mood when you're talking about a wine cellar. It's not like you're talking about bad plumbing, you know. Everybody is happy to talk about wine cellars. So that's one of the reasons why I like this business is it's a feel-good thing. So, but I would say that's the biggest challenge is just getting to understand what it is that they want and then finding out if they're willing to pay for what they want. As you can imagine, we do lots of just huge projects. I don't do a lot of real small things anymore. And 200-300 bottles on something is really small, but I've done several things where we're into hundreds of thousands of dollars and 5,000-6,000 bottles. But there are people out there that have a lot of wine, and I got a project right now we're about ready to start with. Some guy bought a house because he says he's got wine everywhere around the country. You know, he buys it. He's got a storage facility in New York. He's storing it in. He's got storage facilities here. He's got places in Chicago. He goes, I need to get my wine home. One is because I'm tired of paying all these storage fees for these other places, and two, I just want to look at it. So he bought a house that had a 23 by 17 exercise room. And he said, if I buy this house, do you think we can put 5,000 bottles in that room? So I spent a day thinking about it, and I said, yeah. So we're going to line the whole outside with open shelving, because he's got a lot of wooden cases, so just open shelving will be real efficient. And then the center of the room, we're going to do a bunch of floor-to-ceiling mounted metal racks, because he likes that look. And then he's got room in there for a couple of easy chairs and an island, and in total, it was about 5,000 bottles. So he's got $1.5 million worth of wine, he told me. So yeah, there are lots of those people out there. Question to that?
Could you please use the microphone over here, please? Anyone else asking a question, please?
As woodworkers, we all know that moisture can be a big problem with woodworking when it comes to things expanding, contracting, changing with the moisture. The temperature, really not so much. But do you have considerations for the moisture in the way you put your things together? Do you consider that with adhesives and hardware?
You're right, that is a concern. The things that we're making, things like tables, that move, we don't do too many of those things inside a cellar, but we have done them where we're trying to take into account the fact that we know that things are going to move a little bit. So cabinetry and so forth, we don't really go to the extent that you might think is necessary in a wine cellar, because we're trying to keep constant humidity in that room as best we can if the cooling system is working right. So we're keeping it at 55 degrees, let's say, and that humidity level is probably only going to go somewhere between, if it's done right, 40 and 60%. So it's really not that much movement. We don't really think about it as much as I think you guys probably do in some of your other projects.
And does that have anything effect on adhesives or hardware that you select?
We were talking about this earlier. Most of the woods that we're using, or the adhesives, are Type Bond 2. When we do things like humidors or some other things, then we'll get into Type Bond 3. But for the most part, those are the two glues that we're using. If we know it's susceptible to a little more moisture or whatever, we'll make sure we get on the Type Bond 3. Right.
How are you handling the current inflated wood prices that are going up every day?
Yeah, well, I unloaded a truck today, and my lumber people were very quick to send me invoices already. So I looked at them this afternoon, and I paid $219 before tax for a piece of 3/4-inch walnut plywood. And a year ago, that might have been $145, $150. So I have told all of my clients, I said, pricing is good for 2 weeks. And if you don't make a decision in 2 weeks when I buy it, I have all the right to go back and look at what it's going to be. So everybody knows things are going up in price, but again, I'm selling a luxury item, and those are the people that tend to have enough money to spend on stuff like that. But I'm real clear about it up front that things are harder to get, take longer to get, and are more expensive. And everybody sees, they get it. No one's really surprised, except, there are some people that really are kind of aware of what things should cost or what they think they should cost. And I get a lot of clients say, I have no idea what this wine cellar. And we'll come back and say, with the construction of the room and the cooling and the door and the flooring and the lighting and the racking, you're going to spend $70,000. And in their mind, they were thinking $25,000. So back to your question, that's another expectation. Managing those money expectations sometimes is a challenge. So I try to feel my clients out early on. What's your tolerance for how much you're going to spend on this thing? Because I don't want to waste anybody's time. I don't want to sit there and do all these drawings and so forth, and then do some pricing, and then I just spent 3 days doing something and find out that that they don't have the money to spend on it. So I would say for the most part, people are understanding of price increases. But my biggest issue that I had in this last spring, which has now gotten better, is some of this metal racking that I was ordering. That literally was on a slow boat from China. And I had clients that were waiting 8 months for things that in the past where I would order, I'd have it 3 days later. So they had a wine cellar ready to go for 8 months and couldn't put any wine in it. So. But they seem to have solved some of those things. And every time I've ordered something in the last couple of weeks, they literally ship it out 2 days later.
Have you had anybody ask for bottle turning capabilities?
Well,
whether automatic or otherwise?
Well, you should never turn a bottle of wine.
Champagne, though, you do.
No, if you're making champagne, but nobody's making champagne. The only reason they're doing that with champagne is to, when they do it disgorgement, they're turning it to get all the lees down on the bottom, the neck of the bottle. And that's what that riddling rack is for. And then they take it over, they dip it in a brine, real cold brine, and they pop it off, and all the lees falls out. That's the only reason you're turning it, to get all that junk out of the champagne bottle. And then they put their dosage back in it and then recork it. So you should never turn your bottle of wine in your wine cellar. I actually hear that question quite a bit, and that's just a champagne making technique. That refers, the wine cellar is there to trap all the sediment. You want the sediment to fall to the bottom of your bottle or on the side, because that's where all your tannins and so forth. That's why you're aging some things to take those tannins away. You start turning your bottles, all you're doing is just mixing it back up, and you just defeated the whole purpose. So, but you will see that everything is laying horizontally as best it can. When we do something at I'll call it a display angle, we're usually no more than 15 degrees. If you took the capsule off the bottle, you'll notice that the wine is still in contact with the cork at 15 degrees. You start going taller than 15 degrees, and now your fill level may not be touching the cork, and that's where you're going to have cork issues. So, but for the most part, everything lays on its side. The nice thing these days about some wineries are making some screw caps, and then you don't mind standing it up because that doesn't matter because there's no cork in there. That comes into play a lot when we do like end display cabinets where we're not laying things down, you're standing them up. I tell people on those things, put decanters on it, something you don't mind standing up. But wine with a cork in it standing up, unless you know you're going to drink it soon, and I think it's a bad idea. And I drink a lot of wine, so. That's the other good part about this business. You get to drink a lot of good wine. Trying to think what other things that might be of interest. I know this is, we should be talking about woodworking, but there's a lot of heavy lifting in this job. I will say one thing. Just unloading trucks. That big job I was talking about with the 5,000 bottles. I think I'm going to order 40 sheets of plywood for that job, just to handle all this open shelving. So right there, that's a lot of just unloading of your truck. I buy most of my lumber from Cedar Creek Hardwoods, and They literally will back their truck right up to my loading dock. But I don't have a forklift, so I just got us 3 guys and maybe the truck driver helping us unload things. So a day like today, that was a lot of sweat. Luckily, it wasn't a huge order today, but I'm doing a cellar in Napa Valley, believe it or not, in September. It's a local connection, a guy who bought a house in Napa. He's going to retire there, and he doesn't like the cellar that was in this house. So he's already ripped it out, and it's under construction. And he said, "Would you drive out there and put it in?" I said, "Yeah." Recently I've been to Reno. I've been to Chicago a couple times. I've been to Atlanta. I've been to Tacoma, Washington, and it's all just been loading stuff in a big truck and as many tools as I feel like I can't borrow out there. And there's a lot of driving, but as long as he's willing to pay for expenses and so forth. But that one's going to be similar to the one on the right. It's going to be black. So we're using birch, and we're going to dye it all black. And then he's got some real neat artwork that's got some orange. We're going to use our drawer unit's going to be rip-cut white oak drawer fronts. He's got some orange color that's getting picked up in his granite, which has already been picked out. He's got a nice piece of art that's got some orange in it, so it's going to be a kind of a modern sort of looking cellar when it's all done. But I'm not really looking forward to the drive. I'm not a truck driver, but I'll do it. I've got a buddy of mine that doesn't mind going on road trips. He's got to take vacation from his regular job, but he knows how to drive a truck, so you got to trade off every 6 hours, otherwise you're going to kill yourself. Any other questions? Yeah.
Do your clients actually drink the wine, or they just use it for investments?
I couldn't hear.
Do the clients actually drink the wine, or do they use it as an investment?
Well, both. I've got one client I knew that had like 8,000 bottles in his cellar, but they did so much charity work and entertaining and giving away. They said that they would easily go through 1,000 bottles a year. So for them to have 8,000 bottles, it just made lots of sense. I've got another guy we did a huge cellar for. He's a wine importer, so he's doing that obviously for investment purposes. He wanted a place to store it. But I do know there are other people that are in it. I know I'm in it for drinking, but that's one thing. Anyone who is in the investment world these days, this is just an alternative investment. And it actually, wine, if you're buying the right stuff, can make some money for you on the secondary market. So if you tapped out on some investment ideas, wine is not a bad one. And I know people have made lots of money doing that and selling bourbon these days. I mean, I a friend of mine, he's got so much bourbon, but he goes to these auctions and he'll buy like raffles. You may win, you may lose, but when you win, you win the hard to get stuff. And then that stuff might be worth, I mean, he showed me a $38,000 bottle of bourbon the other day that he won in a raffle. And he told me, "I'll sell it to you for $32,000." But I think he probably spent $400 on raffle tickets, and he got this $30,000 bottle. So there are ways to make some money. But he really plays the game. He's watching these things all the time. He knows how to read bottles. The inside when you look at all the codes that are in the bottles. Which floor of the bourbon house this came from, and when it was distilled and everything else. I mean, they have all the information in a bottle. You just got to know it. So he could walk over here, pick up a bottle, and tell you everything there is to know about it without even looking anything up. It's kind of neat, but a lot of education there.
Just curious on what your thoughts are on how wine-related business and everything is going to change with what Hoffman's doing.
Well, the thing that Hoffman is doing is he's selling. First of all, I think it's kind of cool with all of the stuff that he's doing, just touristy, to get people out to drink wine. Now, he's selling Missouri wine. And all the wine snobs I hang out with are not drinking Missouri wine. They're drinking, world-class, different grape varietals, from Napa and France and so forth. Missouri, it's apples to oranges, but I don't know a whole lot of wine geeks that I hang out with or that are my clients that are drinking a lot of Missouri wine, because it's not that age-worthy for cellaring. It's probably more for drinking early on. I mean, that's the honest to God's truth. I think about Missouri wine is there's like a Norton grape, I think is cellarable for a little while, but pretty much everything else, I think it's probably 95% of it is consumed within a week of when it's bought. But I like his concept about, getting people, places to go and, just the bed and breakfast things. And I'm interested in trying out his river cruise. I think that would be a blast. I've never done that. My wife and I were talking about doing that. I've never seen Missouri from the water looking back this way. So that's where I'm going to enjoy it, I think.
If
One more.
If going to build their own, what mistakes should you tell them not to make?
Oh, if you're going to build your own wine cellar, the biggest mistake, I think, if you really want to temperature control it, is to not do a tight room properly. You can't take any shortcuts about making this a tight room, which means, again, weather seals and vapor barrier and insulation and everything else. So I would say that's the biggest thing that people should not do improperly. Other than that, it's just a matter of what you like for your racking style. You can spend a lot of money on racking, and you don't have to. My job is all about jigs and jigs and jigs and jigs, as you can imagine. If you're going to make a wine rack that goes like this, every single one better be exactly the same size. So I built a jig about 8 feet long. I'd lay my posts in, and it's got separators where I call my pins go, or my pegs, and I get everything lined up, and I push things certain directions, and I go boom, 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 boom with my staple gun. And then I know exactly a rack that's 12 rows high is exactly this measurement, and you add one more row and it's that measurement. So the mistake I would say is find a way to make things consistent. Otherwise, you start stacking things on top of it, and then it's just not going to line up. So find a way to be consistent with what you do. Those are probably the two biggest things I would say: make a tight room and make it consistent.
Yeah, I was asking about the dyes that you use. The dyes I get are trans-tip, and they're exorbitant in cost. Do you have a source where you can get it by the quart or by the half gallon? Or
I was talking to my guy that works for me, Tim, and I said, some questions are going to come up today about lacquer and dyes and stains, and I'm not going to have an answer to it. So I don't, but I could get you some answers from my finishing guy, since I'm not the guy doing it. It's my landlord owns the building, and he's the finishing guy.
Oh, okay. Well, it'd be great if you could do that, because I'm trying to do more dyes because I don't like the stains as much. And
the nice thing about the dyes is that it dries like that.
Exactly.
But if you don't do it correctly the first time, you really can't go over it the second time without changing. Like, especially doing something black. You spray it once. Oh, I didn't do it hard enough. You spray it twice. Now it's twice as black as that other piece that you did next to it. So I think dyes have their own little challenge to them about just making sure you get it done right. But I can get you some information, because I don't know where he buys it from a painting company somewhere, and I just don't know where he gets it from.
If you want to use dye, like a dark one on a piece of poly or maple, would penetrate the wood better than a stain, which really just lays on the surface?
I think a lot of it depends on the wood species, I found.
Well, the softer it is, the better it penetrates.
Yeah, like maple, every time I tell my finishing guy I'm going to do a maple project, he does this. Because it's so hard, it doesn't want to absorb it. But he thinks dyes work better on something like maple because it doesn't absorb it. He thinks you just get a more even color with the dye on a really, really hard wood, is what he tells me. Things like sapelli take stains I've never had to dye that because it takes stain so nicely. Walnut takes stain so nicely.
Walnut's open grain, soft, and maple sapelli's harder though, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's the stuff I buy is quarter sawn. I don't know if that helps with the grain pattern, but it seems like every time we do something in sapelli, it always takes the stain beautifully. Birch, I find, we've done a couple projects lately with darker colors, and birch can get real splotchy. I think it's almost as hard doing a birch stain job than it is a maple stain job. We just tend to have to monkey around with it a lot more. Fasteners-wise, and we haven't really talked about that for the most part. I'm making everything with staples, and then when we're putting trim and assembly screws. I use a lot of screws to some of it makes all my stuff real strong. But I try to glue trim pieces on. Like if I did a diamond bin, I try to glue all those pieces and nail them on and get those all sanded in my shop before I even bring that over anywhere, so I have to do that stuff at the shop. It always looks so much nicer when you're staining things too, when all your sanding work is done up front, rather than applying those trim pieces at the job site. You know, you got to, where the trim pieces meet the wood, it just never looks as good if you do it just applying a piece right there. But there are certain things I have to do on the job site because I can't get into a room. So it's a little bit, that's why it's real important to make sure that I get all my stuff milled, all my hardwood milled to 21/32 of an inch. So all my pegs are 21/32 square. And then when I want to face my plywood, I buy it 21/32 by 3/4 and apply it that way. So I try to get everything always to line up, and I'm trying on purpose not to get shadow lines unless I want on purpose to get a shadow line to have a wider piece of what I'm trying to cover, just because making it real perfect is, you got to be really perfect, otherwise it's noticeable right away. Everybody can see, you know, the edge of your plywood somewhere. So that's a challenge sometimes too. The other thing, I'll just buy 4/4 lumber as well and just have a supply of it in my shop, and we got equipment that we can plane things down and, you know, rip them down to different sizes. So if I need a certain size board, I've got a lot of sapelli boards that are 12 feet tall and, you know, that wide, and I just rip what I need out of it. So it's always nice just to have the little hardwoods, because you're always going to run into something that you didn't plan for, and then you can just make it. So not everybody has all the equipment that we have in the shop, but it's all, you know, relatively basic stuff for anybody who's got equipment. Routers come into play quite a bit in our job for rounding edges, and we make a lot of drawers, believe it or not. Drawer units and just cabinets, you know, simple box cabinetry. I buy all my hardware from Compy distributors, and again, they'll deliver right to your shop. If
Love Compy.
yeah, they've got supply issues these days too. Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking of, because I ordered some things. They said, "Oh, I have it to you in 7 weeks." So I'd say these days just plan ahead, you know, as best you can for all the stuff you got to order. Plan ahead, because it's going to take a little while to get it. Anything else? Hope the pictures helped. I mean, you can see the scope of things we do tends to be on the larger size, but you know, small things. You know, my daughter asked me to make a cornhole set for her the other day, so we'll do that stuff too. She's getting married in 2 weeks, and that was her idea for what she wanted to get her soon-to-be husband for a wedding present. She goes, "Can you make some cornhole things for me, and I'll paint them?" I said, "Fine." I don't think I need more than 4 or 5 hours for that. Okay, well, thank you very much for having me.